What happens when the pursuit of meaning collapses under its own weight? This isn't just a critique of semantics, it's a philosophical warning and a call for reflection. In this video, I revisit my 2022 paper, The Reflexive Ceiling of Philosophical Semantics, published at PUC University, and ask a difficult question. What if our greatest theories of meaning, from Frege's sense-reference distinction to Quine's rejection of analyticity, from Tarski's truth conditions to the machinery of intentionality, all quietly paved the way to semantic bloat? What if they didn't solve the problem of meaning, but made it deeper, more fragile, and harder to live with? This video doesn't simplify, it demands. It traces the path from formal precision to philosophical exhaustion, and proposes semantic skepticism not as defeat, but as discipline. If you're still watching by the end, you're part of the ecosystem we're trying to build, one where YouTube becomes a serious space for philosophical inquiry.
This is the reflexive ceiling of philosophical semantics, and why I prefer semantic skepticism. A discussion on the depth of meaning and the limits of formalization. I have always had a soft spot for semantic skepticism, not because it is particularly comforting, but because it possesses a certain elegance and organizational rigor that its opponents often lack. Unlike its more mathematically inclined counterparts, which endlessly stack layers of formalization onto meaning, semantic skepticism takes a different path. Instead of attempting to resolve complexity through mathematical precision, it embraces complexity by recognizing how it moves from clarity to opacity. It does not aspire to fix the ambiguities of meaning, but rather to demonstrate that such ambiguities are not accidents or defects in our system of thought. They are the inevitable outcome of the very structure of language. Where others see a path from simple signs to increasingly sophisticated formalized models, the skeptic sees a trajectory that shifts from linguistic technicism to philosophical enigma. Meaning is not a riddle to be solved, but a problem that deepens the more we attempt to tame it. It is from this perspective that I introduce my article, The Reflexive Ceiling of Philosophical Semantics, published in Geltung, Journal of PUC University in São Paulo, in 2022. Now presenting the question, what is the reflexive ceiling? In this paper, I argue that modern semantics has a reflexive ceiling, a point beyond which it cannot go without imploding under its own weight. The field struggles to model the contingent features of an object without oversizing itself, introducing increasingly elaborate constraints and inflating its own architecture to handle intentional and modal specifications. At first glance, our argument seems straightforward. Semantics, as traditionally conceived, faces insurmountable difficulties in escaping its self-referential trap. When we examine its founding figures, Frege and Russell, the ones with whom we are most concerned, we see how even their most elegant systems require constant expansion in order to accommodate higher-order predications or propositional functions. In doing so, they unwittingly created a double life of meaning. For Russell, meaning was divided into two extensional layers, i.e., meaning involved a distinction between simple entities, individuals, and propositional functions, which operate on these entities. For Frege and later Church and Carnap, an intentional layer was introduced alongside the extensional one. This duality led to a crisis. Some, like Quine, rejected the entire project of meaning, arguing that semantics could not provide a stable foundation for linguistic understanding. Others, Davidson and Dummett, for instance, insisted that semantics could still be saved, as long as we reinterpreted meaning in terms of sentence-forming mechanisms for an entire language. But even these non-skeptics had to make sacrifices. The more layers were introduced, indexicality, circumstances of evaluation, intentional modifications, the clearer it became that meaning was not being preserved but redefined. The search for a universal parameter capable of keeping meaning intact across different contexts became a desperate idealization. Here we follow Putnam's intuition. We introduce theoretical parameters to protect propositions from being invalidated by counterexamples, ensuring that their truth conditions do not collapse under argumentative pressure. The problem? This only works inside highly coherent and stable scientific theories, which means that truth conditions, once thought to be purely semantic, turn out to be something else entirely. Now, the section, The Danger of Metaphysical Semantics. One of the more insidious consequences of this reflexive ceiling is the illusion that semantics can model empirical content through a metaphysical extension of truth conditions. The idea is that we can map counterfactual claims using formal semantic tools. But as I argue, this is not only artificial, it is dangerous. The logic behind this project is seductive. If we can extend the Frege-Tarski model to cover non-classical semantic cases, then perhaps we can stabilize meaning even in its most counterintuitive forms. A legion of brilliant scholars, whose names I will politely omit for the sake of brevity, have devised highly sophisticated ways to integrate counterfactual reasoning into formal models. The result? An expansion of meaning to absurd proportions. Now, to understand meaning means not just grasping ordinary language, but also mastering advanced scientific theorizing about causality, non-causal connection, and high-level abstraction. This leads to an absurd conclusion. 1. Either children can naturally acquire complex scientific reasoning in the same way they acquire their native language. 2. Or learning a native language requires an algorithm as sophisticated as scientific discovery itself. 3. Or there is no strict divide between everyday understanding and theoretical knowledge because language, at its core, operates through interdependent networks of belief, truth, and rational constraints. The process of acquiring meaning is thus not a stepwise accumulation of syntactic or semantic rules, but an ongoing dynamic engagement with others in a shared world. This tension, which we expose in our article, reveals something deeper. The deeply interwoven nature of language, cognition, and epistemology, challenging any attempt to isolate linguistic meaning from broader human inquiry. Final reflection, a skeptic response to the semantic dogma. Our article challenges this entire tradition. We argue that some sentences can be captured within Tarski's framework, but not because of their inherent semantic properties. Rather, because they have attained a theoretical maturity that stabilizes their truth conditions. Consider Darwinism. It has reached a point where it is stable, resistant to counterexamples, and deeply embedded in our scientific culture. It can be stated with the same triviality as a child states facts in their native language. But we must be careful. This does not mean we now have a universal method for categorizing all truths in a semantic manner. It merely means we are lucky enough to stabilize certain representations in a way that makes them linguistically accessible. And yet, this should not make us complacent. The ability to disquote certain statements with ease, their ability to speak for themselves in a transparent manner, might seem like a philosophical blessing. But we should remain skeptical. Disquotation, in this context, refers to the apparent straightforwardness of certain statements, where quoting them adds no additional content beyond simply asserting them. Perhaps this disquotation is itself a trick, a philosophical illusion that tempts us into believing that meaning is simple, when in fact, it remains as obscure, enigmatic, and ungraspable as ever. So, to bring this to a close, what we've explored here is the gravitational pull of semantic formalism toward a kind of self-defeating bloat, where the very attempt to model meaning becomes an exercise in distorting it. The ambition to stretch semantic theory beyond its natural limits doesn't clarify meaning, it mutates it, turning an everyday triviality into an esoteric construct burdened with theoretical overreach. The reflexive ceiling I've outlined is not just a technical limitation, it's a philosophical warning. Any project that seeks to enclose meaning within rigid structures risks collapsing under its own weight. And that's precisely where skepticism, the kind I defend, proves its worth. Not as an obstacle to knowledge, but as the most disciplined way of keeping our conceptual ambitions in check. If you've made it this far, I genuinely appreciate it. Thanks for listening and for thinking along with me. See you next time.